The member for Kenora-Rainy River.
Thank you, Speaker. As has been the focus of the debate this afternoon and throughout the duration of this bill, auto insurance rates and high auto insurance rates are a concern right across this province. Whether it's people down south or people all the way in the north, all across the north, especially in Kenora-Rainy River. And the NDP has really prioritized this issue as a party. And in fact, we incorporated it in our 2013 budget asks, where we asked for a 15% reduction in auto insurance rates. Now, the Liberals wouldn't come all the way. They wouldn't commit to implementing those 15%, the 15% savings in 1 year. And so they've kind of drawn that out. And what we've actually heard from people, what I've heard from people who've contacted my constituency offices, is that they've actually seen their rates increase. And now we're seeing bills like this, where it's virtually devoid of any cost-reducing measures for consumers. It does have some measures in place, as has been mentioned many times, to reduce costs on the part of auto insurance companies, but consumers, all they basically get is just the flashy title of Fighting Fraud and Reducing Auto Insurance Rates Act. In Kenora-Rainy River, as I said, affordable auto insurance rates are a top priority. In 2013, I sent out a budget survey where 90% of my constituents said that lower insurance premiums are either a high or extremely high priority. And in Kenora-Rainy River, as I mentioned earlier today, public transportation is virtually non-existent, and that people really do rely on their vehicles to get from point A to point B to access things like groceries, work, and healthcare. In fact, this past Friday, I participated in the Provincial Day of Action against high hydro rates, and transit in the north, which in the north, of course, means road maintenance and affordable auto insurance rates, were key themes. And so for people living in a place like Red Lake, where the protest was held, again, on hydro, it's very difficult to talk about any of the issues facing Northerners without transit coming up. And especially in the case like a place like Red Lake, which is 175 kilometers north of the Trans-Canada, where the only real accessible way in or out of the community is by road, because and often a $600 flight in and out of the community just is not practical for a lot of people. And we don't have the luxury of public transit. So with the necessity of having a vehicle, that means vehicle payments, it means vehicle maintenance, and of course it means gasoline, which is high enough in urban places that are along the Trans-Canada, like Dryden. It's even more expensive when you go to more remote communities like Red Lake, like Sioux Lookout, and in the far north. And of course it also means auto insurance, which is mandated by the province. And because having auto insurance is required by law, I believe that as legislators, we have a duty and an obligation to make it affordable, and that there needs to be a balance between the consumer's ability to access this mandatory service at a fair and reasonable cost and the company's ability to cover its costs. There needs to be that fairness, there needs to be that balance. And presently the scale has tipped away from this needed balance in favor of insurance companies. And in fact, we all remember, or many of us recall, the changes that were made by this government in 2010, which resulted in increased premiums and slashed accident benefits, where the accident benefits were essentially halved. And I saw this firsthand because at the end of August in 2010, I was involved in a head-on collision just outside my house. I've mentioned this before, and I required and my partner required some significant non-OHIP insured healthcare services, and at that time there was a lot of emphasis placed on our placed by our healthcare providers on when exactly this accident occurred, and it was very obvious to us the types of accident benefits that we would be entitled to. In fact, we were entitled to, because I believe we had the collision on August 26th, 2010, versus if we had been involved in this collision on September 1st, 2010. So since that time, my constituency offices and the constituency offices of my predecessor have been flooded by people who are upset to see their benefits decrease and their premiums increase, despite having no changes to their driving record. And then, of course, we later found out that these changes that were made in 2010 by this present government actually saved the auto industry $2 billion. And so now, at a time when we, the NDP, have made it abundantly clear that these savings have not materialized, that they have not been passed down to consumers, the Liberals have come forward with this bill, and that again only reflects the needs of the auto insurance industry. So we should really take a look at some of the measures that are included in this bill, and two that I want to focus on in particular. The first is by denying accident victims access to the courts and replacing it with a tribunal, it removes fundamental rights as citizens. It increases appeal costs for consumers, because under the new tribunal system, if an accident victim is successful in proving that the insurance company should have paid the claim benefit, the insurance company is forced to pay only a tiny fraction of the legal costs. So this is a significant change from the court system, and it really places the burden on the individuals who are already injured, even if they have a very strong case. And I would have expected a little more from members on the government side. There's a lot of riffraff that's kind of a lot of discussion that's going on in that site. This is a very serious issue to my constituents, and I would hope that they would pay attention. The other thing is, if the accident victim is injured and it is someone else's fault, the victim now has to pay a lawyer to bring forward two entirely different cases in two entirely different systems. One in the court against the person who injured you, and this new arbitration against your insurance company who denied you the benefits. So now the accident victim will have huge extra legal costs and two different legal proceedings. So none of these changes have anything to do with fighting fraud, but they have everything to do with making it easier for insurance companies to wrongfully deny benefits, delay settlements, and make it harder for people to collect what they are rightfully owed. And then the second point I want to address is that of prejudgment interest. This bill would change a 30-year-old rule that has been very important to those who have suffered injuries in Ontario. Prejudgment interest on pain and suffering damages is intended to compensate an innocent victim when the negligent person's insurance company delays paying those damages. So it basically ensures timely payment for pain and suffering. Currently, insurance companies are required to pay 5% interest in whatever a person is owed for pain and suffering. So if a serious injury occurs and a person is owed $50,000 for pain and suffering, and the insurance company delays paying for 3 years, they have to pay $7,500 in interest. That may not be a lot, but it's incentive for the insurance company to deliver, to make these payments. And by making these changes, which is included in this bill, if these provisions are passed and the prejudgment interest rate is reduced to 1.3%, then the insurance companies stand to earn 2.7% profit on their money, on a person's money who is rightfully owed this money for every year that they're put off settling. So these amendments were introduced under the guise of fighting fraud and reducing automobile insurance rates, and they're presented as money-saving initiative for insurers, but clearly the change in the interest rate has nothing to do with fighting fraud. In reality, this change is nothing more than another gift to Ontario's already profitable insurance sector, on top of the recent substantial cuts that have already netted insurance companies billions of dollars in profit. And so in summary, there's a lot that needs to be done to restore the balance between a consumer's ability to access this mandatory service at a fair and reasonable cost and the company's ability to cover its cost. I want to stress that it needs to be fair. No one's suggesting that insurance companies should be taking a loss, but it needs to be fair on both sides. So, pardon me. Aside from the flashy title of this bill, the bill completely misses the mark in restoring fairness to the auto insurance system, and it clearly doesn't make this essential service affordable. And I also question how effective it will be in cracking down on fraud, as there is an obvious disconnect between the measures contained in this bill and eliminating auto insurance fraud. So I do think that we should maybe send this to committee. It'll be an interesting experiment to see if it can be transformed into something meaningful. It'll be interesting to see how much leeway the committee actually has to reform this bill. But that being said, I look forward to making those changes. Thank you.